So with the athletes who begin with a lot of high potential but don't end up making it big, do you think that it's the loss of this exact ability?
Well, sometimes, no, sometimes, I mean, I have a great friend who was a high performing athlete, but he just never quite made the grade. So sometimes, it can be hard. They get injured. They start very young. They're away from home all the time. They're away from their family. So some of them just find it too pressured and they say, no, I don't want it.
Hmm.
And sometimes they just, I mean, the grade is very high, to make it. I was working with someone who was training to be a football player for Chelsea, and they said you have a 2% chance in the youth team of going through. I mean, 2% is very low odds, but it's often the price some people have to pay is just too high.
Um, I follow the work of Dr. Andrew Huberman pretty closely,
Okay.
and he speaks about this part of the brain. I think it's called the anterior cingulate
Mm-hmm.
cortex, and it can be visualized to be a bit of a almost like a muscle inside your brain, which gets strengthened every time you force your brain into doing an activity
Of course.
that it doesn't want to actually do
Yeah.
for the sake of your own growth.
Yeah.
The kind of tricky aspect here is that if you eventually start enjoying that activity, then the growth of the anterior cingulate cortex
Yeah.
stops.
Sure. Of
So it
course.
only grows when you're
Yeah.
actually seeking
You only
discomfort.
really grow when you do what you don't want to do. That's where growth comes from. Doing something you don't want to do, or you're not familiar with that, learning a new language, learning a new skill. We should always be growing, but you can only grow doing something new or different or even uncomfortable.
The place I'm going to with this question is again this chapter of balance, because how do you teach a young person that? I think especially when it comes to our country, there's a lot of people who know that you need to work really hard. I think it's a part of Indian culture,